Tuesday, July the 21st, the year of our Lord 2020, episode 292 of War Room Pandemic, broadcasting live from Capitol Hill. Jack Maxey and Raheem Kassam here in the War Room. Stephen K. Bannon joining us down the line. Jack Posobiec, holdover from the last segment as well. We want to get Jack's final thoughts on what he was just talking about at the end of episode 291 here on America's Voice.News, Newsmax TV, blown through the CCP's firewalls by G News and GTV, and of course on the John Fredericks Radio Network. I want to throw it back to Stephen K. Bannon and Jack Posobiec.
Yeah, Jack, finish up your thoughts about why it's been so tough to get this done. Finish your thoughts, then we'll pivot to Portland.
Yeah, Steve, you were talking about economic pressure, economic sanctions, seizing assets. This bottom line stuff, this hard-nosed approach to diplomacy with the Chinese, this is what they will respond to. If they will not give us the information that we require, then we need to find ways for them to provide it to us. And quite frankly, this is me speaking as a former Navy intelligence officer, I would hope that the full assets of our national security apparatus are being used to procure that information, whether through electronic means or human intelligence means, to get the Americans the information they need to end this fight and win the war against the virus.
Yeah, to me, this is the next phase. We got to. It was originated from there. Whether it originated in a bioweapons program or the lab is something we need to find out. But most importantly, we need to find out how this happened. We know they've lied and covered up from the beginning. The president's got every department that reports to him in the entire government now, and a whole of government really confrontation with the Chinese Communist Party, either for containment or taking it down. If you look at the FBI director, Wray, I mean, he almost sounds like J. Edgar Hoover going after the communist menace in the 1940s and the 1950s. He's really talked about every 10 hours to open up a counter-espionage case. Every 10 hours, the FBI has opened up a counter-espionage case against the Chinese Communist Party. To me, you've got to throw down about this virus. Think about the situation this summer. This is the surge of still the first wave. This is not the second wave. And the reason is it turned out this virus is impervious to heat and humidity. Where is it increasing the most? In Florida, in Texas, in Arizona. Okay? The reason is we know very little about this virus. And we're going to know very little about it until we get back to the source. The source is in China. The people that know that are the Chinese Communist Party. They've known about this since late December of 2019. They've probably known it earlier. But we know they've known about it since then because the CDC of Taiwan warned the world through the World Health Organization on the 31st of December 2019 what was going on in Wuhan, that they had human-to-human transmission and community spread. It's been the lies of the Chinese Communist Party. That's all got to stop. Now, if you see what the Chinese Communist Party stands for, it's cultural Marxism. This is how they've controlled the Chinese people. They destroyed, as Jack Posobiec's talked on here so many times, the four olds. Old customs, old thoughts, old habits, old ideas, old ways. This is what they did in the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution that's going on here is seen in the streets of Seattle, the streets of Portland, the streets of Denver every day. And Jack, I want your comments on this. Now that President Trump has basically started to say, hey, look, there's one thing to protest. There's one thing to have peaceful protests. There's one thing to talk about the issues that are coming up with Mr. Floyd's murder, all these aspects. But it's a different thing when you basically have anarchists and communists, and this is what you have, taking over major cities, important cities, like Seattle, Washington, and Portland, and particularly if local authority won't stand up and protect people, individuals, and property, it's time then for the federal government to have to stand in. Now, Jack, I realize you did reporting from out there. Love to have you walk us through this, and then Raheem and Jack jump in here.
Yeah, Steve, that's right. Well, I was out on the ground in Seattle. We're now seeing the fight has moved down to Portland. And I'd like to read something that I don't think anyone else has been talking about, because they've been trying to make this as some argument between Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland, where this violence is happening, and President Trump and his administration. But listen to the words of Darrell Turner. He's the president of the Portland Police Association. He's a Portland police officer himself. He said, this is no longer about George Floyd. This is no longer about racial equality and social justice. This is no longer about reform and the evolution of policing. This is about violence, rioting, destruction, chaos, anarchy, buildings on fire. His own building, the police union in Portland, was broken into and set aflame. Dumpsters on fire, broken glass. It's time to stand up. It's time to tell your elected officials that the city is under siege because of their inaction. Our elected officials have condoned the destruction and chaos of the city. They have invited privilege and entitlement to burn and destroy our buildings, businesses, and livelihoods. And that's not a Republican. That's not a politician. That's not Jack Posobiec saying that. That's not, Raheem Kassam saying that. That's the head of the Portland Police Union. And we've seen night after night, they're laying siege to the federal courthouse there. You're seeing the violence out there, the anarchy. They're bringing in different groups to act as a sort of buffer, agitprop, human shield to protect the one. And they know what's going on. They know exactly what they're doing. They're augmenting the traditional Antifa anarchist black bloc tactic, which is when they all dress in black, which is designed to obscure their identification so that they can commit violence and what they call direct action to be able to get away from identification from law enforcement entities. You're now seeing other groups provide cover for those violent activities. They're calling themselves a moms group now, these female protesters. But even some of those members of the moms group last night were also attacking the courthouse. And so in this situation, the president said that he's had enough. He sent in federal troops. I should say federal law enforcement, but they are a special unit of federal law enforcement. One particular is BORTAC. That's a tactical unit of the Border Patrol. And then what does the media do? They turn around and say these guys are unidentified, even after they specifically announced who would be going there. It's completely ridiculous. And the fact that they're upset about our president and local officials, if not the mayor, at least other local law enforcement, protecting the order in the streets. That is what President Trump was elected to do. He ran on a mandate of law and order, and that is what he's implementing here in Portland. And he's talking about expanding that across the cities that have seen a rise in crime in this pandemic summer.
Jack, Raheem, I want you and Jack Maxey to jump in here, but Jack Posobiec, what is all the pearl clutching that's going on 24/7 now on mainstream media about the federal officials, the federal authority that went in there is not marked, it's unmarked. I think we got the John Heilemann clip. Can we play that, Raheem? You're seeing a complete meltdown by the left and by mainstream media in this regard.
Yeah, let's roll clip 13.
Everything that's been said here, I think, is about this particular issue is right, but doesn't go far enough. We are talking, this is not just performative authoritarianism. This is authoritarianism. These are paramilitary units. These are the kinds of things that we have seen in tyrannical authoritarian regimes in third world countries throughout the second half of the 20th century. This is not a mystery what's going on here. And I think that to look at this through the prism of symbolic politics, the law and order campaign, Trump trying to rerun the Nixon playbook is true, but doesn't, as I say, go far enough. We are looking, I think, here, and this is a dark, and I don't want to be overly alarmist about this, but I think this is the time to be alarmist, knowing where Donald Trump stands right now politically, understanding where we are headed in this election. I think we are looking at potentially a trial run for a kind of a genuine attempt to through intimidation and potentially through force to try to steal this election.
Steve.
Yeah, Jack Posobiec and then Raheem, Jack Maxey, I want to have you guys jump in. Heilemann, who asked some great questions last week of Richard Haas, I think went a little off the rails this morning. But Jack Posobiec, given your knowledge of being out there and what you just read by the police official, how do you assess what John Heilemann in the Morning Joe crowd said?
Well, they certainly don't sound like they're on the side of the winning team right now, right? This is, I guess Russia collusion didn't do so well, so their new scheme is to say that President Trump's new plan, his new agenda, is to secretly work to implement the laws of the United States of America and fulfill his role as the leader of the executive branch by providing law and order to the streets of these violent cities. Look, we know what's going on. These outlets, these agencies aren't showing those scenes of violence that you just showed, that we show as well. They haven't shown them to their audience, and they're only taking these selectively edited clips of when someone gets arrested. They're not showing the context. They're not showing the 52 now nights of assault of the federal courthouse there, one of the largest buildings in the city of Portland. They're not showing the violence, and they're not talking about the rise in crime that we've seen across almost every major city, every major metropolitan population center here in the United States in terms of violent shootings and homicides that's occurred throughout this summer. The heat is on, and the only way to stop it is through federal law enforcement. And yes, they are going to use tactics requisite with this situation. And by the way, this was a snatch and grab. This wasn't violent. Nobody was punched. Nobody was struck, at least in the video that he's talking about. The fact that they're using unmarked cars, I don't exactly think it's breaking news that the police use unmarked cars. But what's really news is the fact that we've now got outlets out there and people on them who are talking about defunding the police, making it a crime to perform police work. That's not what the American people want. Rasmussen is out this morning right now. 66% say they do not want to defund the police in their cities and their communities, and that number is only going to rise. It's going to be a 70-30 issue. And they know if President Trump runs on that issue and acts on that issue, as you've called for, Steve, action, 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 that is his path to re-election.
Raheem, Jack Maxey?
Yeah, Jack Posobiec, I'm in 100% agreement with you. I see so much frustration amongst our listeners. They really want the president just to take charge of this, or at least call out the bad actors, right? At least identify who they are. And I think that many of our listeners also are very distressed by what they feel is this kind of destruction of our normal American values. This idea that the police are now our enemy, I think to many Americans just feels so viscerally wrong that it's hard to even understand how we got to this place. But I think that one of the things that's super key here is more and more Americans just have to start standing up, and we're watching this happen in various places. I think that the silent majority is just becoming bereft here.
Well, I don't understand when somebody like Heilman says what he says in a clip like that. I don't understand what the alternative is. You see, all these critics of the use of federal officers to deal with what is an organized communist, seditious attempt to overthrow the U.S. government or local governments, agencies, take over police stations, burn them down, etc. Nobody ever asked them the question, and nobody ever has the debate on the left. Okay, well, what's your solution here? What should be done? Should they just be allowed to run rampant? I mean, you have this couple who defended their property and are now facing, federal charges?
Well, it looks like the Attorney General of Missouri is going to make sure that none of that happens as of this morning, but still.
But what's the alternative here? The alternative, as far as these guys in the left media are concerned, is to let this continue to play out, metastasize, and grow, right?
I think so, yes.
Raheem, I was there in the alternative, the autonomous zone of Seattle. I saw how that turned out. Dead bodies bleeding out, people being shot up, criminal gangs moving in to exploit it, police abandoned a precinct on the orders of the mayor. Absolute anarchy in the streets, blood, Jack, violence, and of course, during all of it, the media said, don't worry about it.
At Jack Posobiec on Twitter, One American News, Jack Posobiec, thank you so much for joining us here. We're going to go to a quick break now, but we're so very grateful for your time over these last two segments. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, and Stephen K. Bannon will return. War Room Pandemic after this short break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room in a hot and sweaty Washington, D.C. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam here in the War Room. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, I hope it's hot and sweaty in the War Room, too, because it's been a pretty hot show today. Listen, one of the reasons is that we've had economic experts on here talking about this economic inferno we're going through. If you're an entrepreneur, you know there's both risk, but there's opportunity. You want to seize the opportunity, seize it with NetSuite by Oracle. That's the software package you need. Go to netsuite.com/Bannon, Bannon, today to get your 7 action steps every entrepreneur should be taking. Raheem, I'm now honored to bring in our next guest, Dan DiMicco. He's the chairman of the Coalition for American Prosperity, for a Prosperous America, the Coalition for a Prosperous America. He, along with Curtis Ellis, Peter Navarro, he's been an executive that has fought for American manufacturing and fought for American workers for decades and decades and decades, one of the earliest guys on the Trump movement, and really talked about economic nationalism and how it can revitalize this country. Dan, your chief economist at your organization wrote an incredible piece and real clear policy today that we've got up on our site about 5 things that the administration has to do to reshore American industry, and you say can lead to a victory in November. You know, since the current polling is pretty grim, what are the 5 things you're talking about that the president needs to do? What actions does he need to take today to ensure this?
Well, listen, here's the thing. The polling is polling, right? It was way off in 16. My bet it's way off now. Polls mean nothing if the president plays his cards right, and he's got some great cards. With 4 months or less to go until the election, he still holds the cards necessary to win in November. And it's no secret the president's message about jobs, manufacturing, and China has resonated with voters on both the left and the right. It's also no secret that a select few inner circle advisors to the president still privately object to the idea of reshoring and bringing manufacturing back to America. They are at best dovish on China, and still see the world from a globalist point of view. But the president's instincts are right; they're dead on, and he alone has the authority to use executive action to implement his vision. Reshoring the U.S. industry is just a play needed to reinvigorate voters. Okay, and this is what we put in the article. And the 5-point plan that we recommend is pretty straightforward. The president is certainly not been afraid to break a few pieces of China over the last couple of years and dealing with them through Bob Lighthizer and the USTR and Wilbur Ross and Peter Navarro, and now taking it even further to deal with the Wall Street issues, and also the fact that China unleashed this virus on the world and did nothing to stop it. So the five items, if I can go through them quickly, and then I'll come back to each one. The first one basically is you want to target sectors. You want to identify critical industries where reshoring will start. Right? You have to choose industries critical to both economic and national security, including our health security, such as generic pharmaceuticals, protective equipment, okay, and so on. The president's got to show voters that he's serious about creating several multi-billion-dollar industries and thousands of jobs. He also needs to do things through the government procurement authority, where the U.S. government should jumpstart demand in these critical industries by instructing federal agencies like the military, VA hospitals, etc., to give preference to American-made products. Preference, not maybe, but preference. The third item are financial incentives. The Japanese are doing this now, and to get their companies to move out of China. The U.S. should provide financial incentives like tax credits, aggressive loan programs, research and development funding, and direct subsidies to ensure the growth and development of these industries. This is permitted under GATT, Article 21, which says clearly that a nation may take action to protect its essential security interests. The fourth item, there's a slight typo in this one, in the article, but the fourth one says expand free trade agreements to include, not exempt, to include trusted allies. By focusing on trade with our trusted allies, the U.S. can build a strong bloc of anti-totalitarian governments while making our supply chains more robust and reliable, and speeding and hastening the ability to decouple from China. And this will be good for the entire membership of the bloc, who does not support the humanitarian abuses, the totalitarian governments that China and the mercantilism it's unleashed on the world. And finally, if you do all these things to create these new industries and to rebuild them, where they've been destroyed before by China's predatory pricing and mercantilistic practices, okay, you've got to put things in place that protect those industries while they grow. So the last part of this is raising tariffs. We need to boost tariffs across the board, both bound and applied rates. That's the general tariffs that are out there across the board. And we need to reduce import dependence and protect new industries from foreign predatory competition that's destroyed it over the past 20 years. As they grow and they scale up production, they'll become stronger and be able to stand on their own 2 feet. They need to be given that, I'm going to use the word protection to get to that point, because this is critical to our future economic and national security. And the priority, won't surprise you,
Dan,
the priority is we should be
Dan,
increasing tariffs on Chinese exports. Chinese exports in particular. Yes,
Dan, why are these not been done today? You're talking about we got 105 days left to go. I love the plan, but we've had 4 years, and I understand there's people in administration, Wall Street, and corporations have fought this. But if you haven't gotten it done in 4 years, how are you going to get this done in 100 days? And how are you going to argue to Joe Biden and the globalists that you're the ones to get this done? Because what they're doing right now, if you look at the speech in Scranton when he stole the Buy American meme, the White House and others in the campaign went back and said, hey, you're a globalist, we're economic nationalists. And they went back and said, hey, you had 4 years, where's your Buy American? So Dan DiMicco, you're the guy that's put your heart and soul in this. Where's the action been, and how can action get taken with 100 days left?
Well, here's the thing. There has been action taken from day one on trade, all right? We've had the 232 come in to help the steel and the aluminum industries. We've had the 301 after an extensive study by the USTR coming in and hitting China in particular on intellectual property rights and trade cheating. And we continue to do things. Pompeo has been very vocal the last, I'd say a year, 6 months to a year, on the national security side of this. So has our vice president. So has the president. And the pandemic has just caused this to speed up even more. But what's important to remember here, we've got 25 years to undo in terms of the trade cheating, the predatory pricing, the impact it's had on our manufacturing base, our middle class, okay, and the ability to create wealth throughout the economy, not just at the top end, okay? You lose your middle class, you use that ability to do that. And it's going to take, never was it going to be something done in 3 years. But we put a lot of the building blocks in place. We've negotiated several free trade agreements with Mexico, Canada, and ourselves. Also working one with Japan. Also working one with Kenya. Also working on one with the EU. Okay, these things are all in the works. We've been doing all these things. What we need now is to bring it all together, and that can be done in 120 days because all the groundwork's been laid for this. Okay, and he's already put incentives in place to protect the agricultural industry from the reaction of the Chinese to the 301 tariffs. This is all there. It's up to the president now. He has got the ability to make this happen. He holds the cards. He can issue the executive orders that make this happen now, and he needs to do it. That includes Buy American. It's not that the president hasn't put forward a Buy American concept. Peter Navarro has done it and explained it. Now we need the president to act. We need to stop listening to those doves on China, all right, the globalists that got us into this mess. And everybody knows you can't do this in a day. Now, let me say one last thing about
Steve, you got 2
Senator
minutes here.
Vice President Biden. Vice President Biden has a track record of doing everything to undermine the middle class, everything to undermine our position with China. He's been a China enabler. I call him Beijing Biden. Okay, he can say whatever he wants in electioneering. He's never once stepped up to deal with China. He's taken advantage of it. He's benefited from it. His family has benefited from it. Okay, this is an issue that he can electioneer on, but it holds no water in reality. He's got 20 plus years where he has voted to undo all this stuff, along and support the globalization, and support NAFTA, and support the China favored nation trading status and WTO entrance, and along with a bunch of other people, but he did too. All right, he's not going to change his spots. He's going to change his words to try and get elected. The president's got a track record of actually doing it. The first president in my lifetime, other than Reagan, to confront trade mercantilism like this, and the first one to confront China.
1 minute left.
Which is an existential threat, as Bob Lighthizer said in his note just today. China is an existential threat to our economy and our national security. And the president has to step up and put the EOs forward, and
Dan,
he can do it.
Dan,
he can do it now.
Dan, we're running up
and
into a
be
break
very
here.
consistent with
Dan,
everything he's done.
Dan, we're running into a break here. Steve?
Hello?
Do we have Stephen K. Bannon? I think Stephen K. Bannon may not be able to hear us. Dan, we're up against the break here. Just tell our audience where they can read more from you guys, more from your organization.
Certainly. You can go to prosperousamerica.org, which is our website, and we have been around since 2005. We've got tons of articles, and we have our own research group. We have our own modeling group. We have our own economists.
Dan DiMicco.
So go there to read a little more about us.
Thank you. Dan DiMicco, pleasure to have you on. Make sure you check out their website. War Room Pandemic returns in just a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, good morning and welcome back. The eagle-eyed viewers in the live chat are noticing that Jack Maxey's now in the opening credits there. Jack Maxey here in the War Room with me, Raheem Kassam. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, I noticed that the graphics today are much better since the inclusion of Jack. I guess it took losing half of the War Room with Greg Manns and with Jason Miller to do that. Listen, this show today has been particularly talk about the turbulence throughout the world, whether it's from Portland, Oregon, or in the Yangtze Valley of China, between Beijing and Washington, Wall Street, and in Shanghai. This is a world in turbulence. People are going to get through this, and the way we're going to get through it is the vanguard of entrepreneurs are going to take us through it. If your business is from $1 million in revenue to $100 million in revenue, you need NetSuite by Oracle. Oracle is number one on the cloud. NetSuite's number one with entrepreneurs. Let's go to netsuite.com/Bannon today to get your 7 action steps every entrepreneur should be taking. Raheem, is that the Chinese people didn't have enough problems dealing with this dictatorship that tries to crush them every day, and the American people have now had visited upon them from the Chinese Communist Party this visible CCP virus. And the visibility is the economic destruction and the cultural destruction you see around the world, and particularly the United States, every day. It's shocking to hear and to read your stories in the National Pulse every day, whether it's the mayor of D.C., that's basically working with CCP front organizations, or it's these traditional Republicans that are out for blood, not just for President Trump, but for any elected official that supports President Trump in a incredibly well-funded campaign, to know that the Chinese media was every day, I'm public enemy number one. They're lionizing these guys. So I want to go into some of the stories the National Pulse and you've been doing that have just really been brilliant, and I think need more recognition by the public. The reading public and the American people need to really start paying attention to this to see who the good guys are and the bad guys.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Steve. And, between this audience, between you guys, your endorsements, and all the hard work from the people contributing at the National Pulse, I'm also pleased to say we've had millions upon millions of viewers to the site this month. I mean, it's really growing in a way that I'd actually never imagined it could grow that quickly, but millions upon millions, and we're all already beating out a bunch of the more traditional conservative news sites. And you use the word traditional there, traditional Republicans, to describe some of these groups, some of these people at the Lincoln Project, Rick Wilson, John Weaver, all of these guys. I don't think of them as traditional Republicans. I don't think of them as traditional anything. If they're anything, it's globalists, and they're globalists that got beaten out in 2016 and are continuing to grind an axe. Not against President Trump. President Trump is just the guy standing in the way, but it's against the people, the ordinary people who count themselves as Republicans all over the country, who count themselves as conservatives. Rick Wilson, John Weaver, and that cabal of morons who thought that they could back globalists all the way to the hilt in 2016 and got blown out. They are now trying to exact revenge on the base. That is a critical part of what we're talking about today. We did the DC Mayor Bowser yesterday, and I will get back into that in just a second. But I want to focus in on this Lincoln Project stuff real quick. The Lincoln Project, which takes out very expensive-looking advertisements, looks super cool. They target it at one man. They target it at President Trump. They take out the ads in the segments where they think he will be watching them. Whether it's Fox News, and I don't think Fox News should be airing these things, or any other networks, they're these 30-second clips that are designed to goad the president into a response. And the truth is that when you get into who these people are, when you get into their records, when you get into their FARA filings, their Foreign Agent Registration Act filings, these people have been working for or have been willing to work for external influences, foreign governments, agents of the Russian government, like John Weaver, who filed a FARA form to lobby on behalf of a Russian state-owned company. And now what we're seeing is this coming full circle. The Chinese Communist Party and their media outlet, CGTN, China Global Television Network, have been lauding the Lincoln Project and these never-Trump Republicans at the same time as the political left in the United States have been doing so. So I want to play you this clip so that you can get an idea. I know a lot of this audience doesn't bother to watch MSNBC, and arguably nor should you, but I want you to understand just how much the political left and the left media is pushing the Lincoln Project and driving donations to the Lincoln Project. Let's run this clip.
I'm a big admirer of these never-Trumpers, or the Bulwark people and the Lincoln Project people.
I don't give money to political organizations. I've given money to Lincoln Project because of ads like this.
The Lincoln Project is like watching a Jay-Z Nas rap battle. I mean, they don't let up on this president.
I want the Democrats to pay attention to the Lincoln Project. They're doing a superb job.
The Lincoln Project, those are good commercials.
She didn't say who in the rap battle was Jay-Z and who was Nas. I would argue that Nas won the rap battle, by the way. So, and I would argue that the president is Nas in this scenario. But the Lincoln Project, you hear how the media fawns over them. You hear how MSNBC anchors and guests fawn over the Lincoln Project. And let me read you what CGTN, the China Global Television Network, says on its website about the Lincoln Project. Quote, a leading voice in the online political crusade against Trump, gaining particular attraction in the anti-Trump camp. Quote, taken together, the minute clips are nothing short of a psychological warfare campaign laced with extremely personal messages aimed at provoking Trump's deepest insecurities. CGTN praising, quote, the knowledge and resources in Republican politics, end quote, of the Lincoln Project. And also, quote, critics of the most polarizing American president is not uncommon, end quote. Another CGTN editor heaping praise upon the Lincoln Project, declaring, quote, the end of Trumpism at the hands of Lincoln, end quote. And it goes on and on. The China Daily newspaper that you've heard us talk about here on this show time and time again, it's available on Capitol Hill. It stands on Capitol Hill, on the newspaper stands with Politico, with the Hill newspaper. You can get China Daily, the CCP propaganda rag, here on Capitol Hill. And China Daily lavishing praise upon the Lincoln Project. They talk about how these great strategists are goading the president. And then finally, here's the cherry on top of the cake. Chen Wei-hua, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he's the European Bureau Chief for China Daily, consistently retweets the Lincoln Project. Specifically on July the 7th, the Lincoln Project tweeted, good morning, Donald Trump is the biggest presidential failure in our country's history, retweeted by the European Bureau Chief of China Daily. Steve?
Yeah, listen, if President Trump still thinks she's his friend, this is the tell. The Lincoln Project is lethal, and I think everybody that's a Republican that's giving money to him should ask yourself a question. What is it about President Trump's direction, President Trump's agenda, and what it stands for working people in this country, in the middle class in the country, you don't like? Look, I've said this for a long time, that we won in a coalition. You got to pull every potential vote in there, particularly Republicans. This Lincoln Project's had an impact. Anybody that's saying that's not is just not listening at the data. particularly in places like in Maricopa County in Arizona. It's one of the reasons that I think McSally's so far down. I think it's one of the reasons President Trump is having a tough time getting the traction he needs in a state like Arizona, which is a must-win. So people that are happy talking to the president about the Link Project are just dead wrong. They're having an impact. And to know that CDTV, the global telecommunications media group for the Chinese Communist Party, to know that the People's Daily, which is the official, Pravda of the Chinese Communist Party, to know that these official House organs are lavishing praise on the Lincoln Project tells you everything about the Lincoln Project you need to know. That the existential threat to the American people, the existential threat to the Chinese people, the most brutal dictatorship in known to modern man, okay, is lavishing praise on these people, tells you everything about the Lincoln Project that you need to know. And to know that people are giving money and that people that call themselves Republicans and call themselves conservatives are working and putting in hard work into this project and having the worst dictator since the Nazis support you should tell you everything about your work and everything about your target. This thing has been, I think, lethal from the first day. It's insidious, and to me, particularly if you're a Republican, I understand if the left and the enemies of Donald Trump want to give money, but when I hear Republicans, and I think the story broke, Raheem, I'd like to have your and Jack's input, that John Kasich is thinking of going in and talking to the at the Democratic convention in support of Biden. That shows you that the Republican Party globalists are really taking the mask off and showing who they support.
I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful that he's found his home. It's wonderful that he has finally found somewhere that he's comfortable, because he never had anything in common. I mean, you argue what you want to about the leadership of the Republican Party. He may have had some things in common with them over the last couple of decades, but John Kasich never had anything in common with the Republican base, Jack.
Well, this whole Lincoln Project to me is the revolt of the sort of elite country club Republicans, the ones who our listeners call rhinos, Republicans in name only. And I think that the American people need to understand, and one of the things you've done so well, Raheem, is cover this in the National Pulse, because people need to see a separate perspective. And back to the Chinese media covering us, almost every day, Steve, now they have some story about the slave era in the United States to try and, give a little historical perspective on how evil we are today. So everybody has to pay attention to this. We are in a full spectrum propaganda battle, not only with the CCP and the elites in the global banking centers, but with our own elites inside, prospectively, the Republican Party. And we have to pay attention to who these quislings are and what the ultimate goal is. The ultimate goal is to keep this country safe. The ultimate goal is to keep moving forward as a nation. Everything that is going on in the streets, everything that is going on with the Lincoln Project, it is looking backwards, trying to define us by the worst moments in our history, rather than defining us by really what we are, which is a great people, a great family that should be working together to make this country great.
Steve, we've got 2 minutes here.
No, I think it's look, Raheem. Let's go into. Can we get to the D.C. mayor, your New York Times piece? You've done such great reporting, and there's so much there. I want to make sure we get to as much as possible.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the D.C. mayor piece we actually went through on the show a little bit yesterday, and I'll restate the case in just a second. This New York Times thing, we're really pleased with this morning that it all came together in time to drop this morning. We went through old copies of the New York Times. We figured, hey, they're pushing the 1619 Project. They're telling us what's what in terms of moralizing at the country over slavery and so on and so forth. So we went back and had a look at what the New York Times' positions was this in editorials. And I've got to tell you, I mean, I have never felt sick to my stomach writing a news story the way I did yesterday afternoon, pulling all of this information together. The paper's headline screaming Negro suffrage a failure, saying, quote, the Democratic Party may justly insist that the evils of Negro suffrage were wantonly inflicted on them, saying that the Republicans were committed the great public crime when it gave the right of suffrage to the blacks, covering this conference down in Montgomery at the behest of the ex-Secretary of the Navy, Hillary A. Herbert. Quote, barriers against Negro suffrage, a consequence of wiser, Council. It was absolutely disgusting. The whole story is exclusive on the National Pulse right now. Nobody else has touched this, by the way. And I just can't help but notice, with everything the New York Times is pushing on the country, with everything the New York Times is trying to assail the right on, this is their legacy. This is who they are, and they have to own it. And we'll make sure that everybody knows about it. The New York Times, exclusive on the nationalpulse.com. Jack Maxey, Stephen K. Bannon, Raheem Kassam return in just a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, we're going to set the audience some homework today. When you go away from this show, we really need you guys to help us keep rising up the rankings. We know you've been doing a great job already, because we are rising up the rankings on the podcast, everywhere else. But we're hearing this morning that, and I've noticed this for some time, by the way, that conservative news sites appear to be disappearing from search engines, coming up lower, not appearing on the Google News feed so much. Even others that use DuckDuckGo and so forth are complaining that conservative news sites, conservative news sources are not showing up as much. And we know that's going on with YouTube and the show and all of that as well. Make sure, by the way, if you have the Pluto app or an Apple TV or anything like that, you can watch it natively on America's Voice as well. You can download the America's Voice app and watch the show that way also, if the Facebook live streams and the YouTube live streams aren't treating you well. But I'm hearing this morning that Citizen Free Press, one of the brilliant aggregators out there, is now no longer showing up on Google at all. It's an absolute disgrace. We'll be covering that story at the Pulse as well. And the National Pulse, by the way, is not showing up on Google News feeds. But what we need you to do, therefore, is you guys need to become a sharing and retweeting army for us. Make sure that no matter how much they try to suppress us, that you're across all of it and you're sharing all of it and making sure that more and more friends of yours and family members and colleagues and whatever it is see the show, hear the show, subscribe to the show, subscribe to the newsletter. The website is pandemic.warroom.org, and I'm pleased to say that we're working on a redesign for that to make it even more user-friendly after I designed that grotesque site that we've got up now, but we threw that together in one night, so we were happy with the way it came out regardless. But all of that being worked on, our commitment to you to bring you the best and make sure that the show improves. Don't worry if Greg and Jason, those guys, go to the campaign. They're doing obviously God's work and serving their country in there, and we're very proud of them for it. The War Room is not going anywhere. And remember where you heard things first, ladies and gentlemen. TikTok is now being banned on federal devices. There was a vote on Monday in the House, and lawmakers voted 336 to 71 to pass the proposal offered by Ken Buck, a Republican in Colorado, as part of the package of bipartisan amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act. The prohibition extends to members of Congress and congressional staff, but basically, no more TikTok if you're a federal government employee, Jack.
And I think it's time we did it. I mean, the Department of Defense made this move in late December last year and forced it through the Navy, Army, Marine Corps, et cetera, in January. And it's kind of funny because that was almost 6 months ago, Raheem, and we're now just starting to hear about it. So the people in the know have known that this is a danger for some time. You heard it from us, but you haven't heard it from the mainstream media till like the last few days. And this is one of those points where we try to keep you guys ahead of the curve. We've only got a few minutes left. You want to go through some of the vaccine stuff?
Yeah, take us away.
Okay, so in the news today, we hear that the Oxford vaccine made by AstraZeneca is going into a phase 3 trial. We hear that Moderna is going into a phase 3 trial. We hear about the Pfizer vaccine that's being worked on in Germany going into a phase 3 trial. While they jockey for who is the best reputational vaccine, they're all pretty much functioning the same. They are providing some antibodies, and as they go into a phase 3 trial, I think it's useful for the audience to understand what do we mean by phase 3 trial. This is when we actually give the vaccine to, say, for example, the phase 3 trial on Moderna is going to be 30,000 people. They think that they can create 500 million vaccines by the end of the year, produce up to 1 billion in the following year. But one of the things that we're having with this vaccine is how long will the antibodies last, and how much of a dosage of the vaccine do you need to get a proper level of antibodies? We saw this in the mass dosings that they did in China with the army, the soldiers, and they were obviously giving a pretty high dosage of vaccine there. And I'm speaking generically about vaccine for all of them right now. They kind of are trying to achieve the same objective. But what they were finding out in China was that the secondary symptoms were really bad, that some of these people were getting knocked out for like a week or more, just feeling awful. And they were finding that out, too, with the Moderna and with the Oxford vaccine. So there's an adjustment that we have to make, right? We have to give you enough so that you will produce antibodies, but not so much that you're going to have a horrible reaction in the vaccine. One of the issues that I think we all have to be aware of is they still have no idea how long the actual immunity is going to last. And in Moderna's case, as they're describing their phase 3 trial, they talk about how are we going to define success. So they're going to give this vaccine to 30,000 people. And it's not as if they're going to go then infect them with the coronavirus. But out of the 30,000 people, there's some hope that somebody will at least test positive. So they'll have an understanding of how this thing works. It's very much a moving target. I think there is some consensus that many people in the population may have to take more than one dosage of the vaccine. I do know that there's a lot of people are against vaccines in the United States. This is a complicated issue. How many of us need to be vaccinated? Traditionally, it's 60 to 70% to provide a kind of herd immunity. We're not sure how that's going to work out with coronavirus, which is much different than...
Well, how does it work out with the flu vaccine?
Well, the influenza vaccine, to be honest with you, we rarely get more than about 40% of the population taking it every year. And truth be known, the influenza vaccine is a good thing to take, especially for children and pregnant women. There is some question as to how efficacious it is in people over 60, 65. Do they actually produce antibodies in an effective way? This is one of the giant question marks concerning the vaccine program here for the COVID-19. Will it work in older adults? And there's been some talk over the years that this influenza vaccine system that we have, realistically, one of its main purposes is to make sure that we have the capacity to ramp up and produce vaccines in a situation like what we're having right now with the pandemic. So
yeah, that's right. And a lot of people in the comment section in the live stream saying, I'm not going to take this vaccine. And I have a great level of sympathy towards people, especially given the rushed nature of this thing. Is we're just supposed to believe, okay, fine, this is all going to work out, tickety-boo.
One of the interesting, I totally agree with that, but one of the interesting things today is there's a Russian company called Gamaleya, which is a vaccine company in Russia, state-operated. And there's news out today that apparently all of the leadership of Russia, including the oligarchs, have been getting little jabs of this vaccine ever since April.
More on that later on in the week. Make sure you're heading over to pandemic.warroom.org, thenationalpulse.com. If you want to help conservative sites and shows, share the stuff now. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. War Room Pandemic. See you then.